the Promoted Podcast. I'm your host, Felicity Furey, CEO and co-founder of We Aspire. And today I'm, of course, joined by my fabulous fellow host, Renee Wootton, aerospace engineer, speaker, all the things. Welcome, Renee. Great to have you back on the show. And today's topic is another juicy one. I think this one came from you. So I'm excited to dive into the topic of insecure bosses. Where do you want to even start with that?
I'm going to start with our welcome to country, or acknowledgement of country, I should say. So I'd like to acknowledge I'm on the lands of the Djurawaya people. It's beautiful country up in the Toowoomba region. Where are you calling from today, Felicity?
I am in Brisbane. I'm in Meanjin. So I have actually had a total Turrbal and Yagara. I almost had a mind blank on the country that I'm on, Turrbal and Yagara. And one of the cool things I love is that there are lots of really awesome corroboree sites around Brisbane. So you've got Breakfast Creek, you've got Toowong Cemetery near where I grew up. So lots of places where people have been meeting and sharing stories for tens of thousands of years, which is exactly what we're going to be doing today as well.
Love it. Thank you so much for that acknowledgement. I was in Meanjin yesterday on the same country. It is beautiful country, but I do really enjoy the weather and just the smaller community that's up in Toowoomba. So definitely acknowledge the people that have conserved the lands up here and kept it beautiful for us to enjoy today. And now, you did introduce the topic, Felicity, insecure bosses. And this one is an interesting one. Throughout my life, I have had numerous bosses, unfortunately, or heard of numerous people's managers or their bosses about the fact that they are insecure and how that impacts an individual in their work. And what I've found in these conversations is the impact is significant. It can be such a tricky thing to try and support somebody that doesn't believe in themselves wholeheartedly or second guesses you or always thinks that perhaps they're being undermined or, there's negative intent from the team that's supporting that particular boss. And that's a really awful place to be when somebody doesn't back themselves and know their value and treat the people around them with dignity and respect as a result of that. It is a tricky conversation to have, to be honest, because no one comes into a role with the intention of upsetting others and treating others as less than or not allowing them to bring their full selves to work as a result of their manager's behaviour. But inevitably, when you are working with someone that is insecure, it's incredibly tricky to navigate. So a couple of things. In my experience throughout my entire career, the things that I've learnt, I want to walk you all through around how to identify that you have an insecure boss, and then when you should raise the flag, ask for help, or potentially raise it with HR. Now, for me, it's a bit of a serious and somber topic because, I think that I've heard several instances, particularly in the last 5 years in my career, where that's really become prevalent. And I also wonder, Felicity, if it's something that has become more prevalent as I've become more senior, where people management becomes more and more important as you become a leader and get promoted. And we are here to help people get promoted and be great when they get there. And unfortunately, that sometimes means taking the good with the bad. So I think, that's where we'll kind of take the direction for our podcast today. Before I jump into my insights and what to look for, Felicity, do you have any experience like this, or do you have anything that you want to add?
It's really great. I'm really keen to get stuck into how do you identify an insecure boss, and then when do you put up that red flag or go to HR for help. And I certainly have had times in my career where I think I should have gone to HR sooner, and there's been some things that have helped me along the way when I've had to go to HR about bosses. And you reminded me of this experience really early on in my career where I actually had a boss, get this, he told me, I'm not going to be a good engineer because my parents weren't engineers. And I would do these designs, and I remember this guy came up. So I did this design. It was a retaining wall design. It was not like anything very exciting. I didn't really know how to do it. Couldn't remember it from uni. I went and spoke to the geotech team. The guy kind of walked me through how to do it. I was like, oh, great. I remember. I'm going to go away and do it. Did this design, seemed to work out. And then one of my colleagues came up to me a few weeks later and he goes, I'm really confused because I just had to do the exact same retaining wall design that you did and I got the same answer as you. So I don't know what this boss is on about. I don't know why he got me to do this. I just thought I'd let you know. And I was shocked. I thought, wow. And this was not a good experience. I was crying in the office and I wish I'd actually known those signs. It was one of my very first jobs. I went and spoke to HR about it, and then they put me in a different office, and I never saw or spoke to this person again. There was no conversation. I felt like it was very much swept under the rug, move Felicity to a different team. So I'm thinking now that probably was an experience where this person did have some insecurities, and yeah, it was showing up for me like I was doing a bad job, and it was such a tricky situation, especially as one of my first work experiences, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I was like, is this normal? Like, is this how people talk in the workplace? I've got no idea. So it can be, I think, tricky if you're in some of those new experiences or new to leading. What are those signs? So Renee, that is an awesome place to start. What do you think? Do you think my boss is insecure?
Oh, it's hard to say, right? And I think this, the advice and the conversations we have today really can be employed and applied to not only your manager and your boss, but also your peers or your work colleagues, even your family members, your personal life. These themes, for me have occurred in my family. They have occurred in my workplace and certainly in my friendship groups. And I've lost friends over it. I've made decisions to cut ties with certain family members, and I've left jobs as a result of people like this. So whilst I can't answer your question specifically, Felicity, without a lot more information, what I can do is step us through some of the initial signs that really help us identify. And I think a very quick call out, when you do figure out that you are working with or you have insecure people in your life, I think there's a real important call out here to say that you shouldn't treat people that are insecure as less than. They may have had experiences in their life that have, formed their self-views. And as a result, those views aren't strong of themselves. They don't love themselves enough, potentially. They don't maybe don't have the right skill set for the job, and they know that, right? So that leads to and breeds insecurity. So the thing that you can do as a true leader in these instances where you do find yourself working amongst insecure people is to help elevate them. The best thing you can do is help them build their self-confidence. However, I think that does come with a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is when it starts affecting you, your mental health and your well-being, you need to ask for help and support and raise that further. So let's get into it, shall we, Felicity?
And Renee, just for the record, I'll be the first one to admit that I am super insecure about a whole bunch of stuff. And maybe the whole time it's actually me being the insecure one rather than my bosses. So I may find out in this conversation all my insecurities, which I'm well up for improving and learning myself. So let's get into it.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And I have to say, I am also privy and someone else that suffers from whether it's imposter syndrome or insecurity. I think the difference is, though, how do you treat others as a result of that insecurity? So when I feel insecure, I go to the people that I trust most and I say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is why. What do you think? And then generally I'll have someone mirror back a really great perspective or give me context that helps me break through that insecurity. And so I always challenge people that, yes, no one's free of insecurity. The difference is if you project it onto other people and then treat people inappropriately as a result of that insecurity. And so it's really up to each of us to manage ourselves, to manage those feelings, those thoughts, those inner beliefs, and get support from the people we trust to try and overcome them. But where you are working with people that haven't taken the liberty to self-manage, we're here to support you through identifying it and then helping you put your hand up to get that support. So, number one, consistent micromanagement that impedes your work. So if their insecurity leads to excessive micromanagement, then it's preventing you from completing your tasks and actually, meeting deadlines or venturing out and building your own confidence around how to complete a task. So An example of this might be, Renee, can you go and build this PowerPoint presentation and get it ready for, an investor of ours? And then I go away and do the task. Then my manager comes back over, corrects a number of things, and then that kind of happens on an iterative basis. And then maybe they even take over your work and present it on your behalf and don't really acknowledge you. There's a lot of all of these little, signs, warning signs that, perhaps they're micromanaging your work at that point in time. Next is emotional outbursts or negative feedback loops. I have a great example of this, one I may have shared previously, but I did have a boss in the past that I asked to give feedback to them. And then in that meeting, he had an emotional outburst and gave me some really poor feedback in that moment. And so that's a really great example of they got defensive, they weren't listening to what I was saying, and they felt like they needed to reduce my self-esteem in order to make themselves feel more superior, potentially. So that was another great example of an insecure boss. Next is obstructing your growth opportunities. So when a boss insecurity limits your access to professional development is another great one. So, where I just mentioned previously that, rather than you presenting your own work, they jump in and present for you. They might speak over you in meetings. You might not get a chance at all to speak in meetings. That's another great example of potentially an insecure boss. Can you relate to any of that, Felicity?
Yeah, it's really interesting just noticing all those it's like the little micro signs along the way. And I think for sure that last piece around having them almost, I feel like, take over your work, or it's kind of like putting you down in some kind of respect. And I think there's been a lot of times where I've also seen that in other team members too. I think other things are, being overly defensive would be another one of, people being defensive of the way they're doing things and not really being open to new ideas or building people up. There's a guy I worked with who was the complete opposite of this. His next shout out to James Wijamani. I used to work with the Brisbane City Council. We've been in touch. He's come in as a mentor with We Aspire recently. And the last time I spoke to him, I said, what's your goals for your new team? And he was a partner in the firm that he was in. And he said, my job is to get everybody promoted, and great leaders build other great leaders. So I think the opposite of that is that, insecurity of, I don't want to build up my team. I don't want them to be better than me because of that. So I think if you're noticing a leader building other people, then that's a sign they're not insecure, I would say. And that's the kind of leader you want to surround yourself with, and the kind of leader that certainly I aspire to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely second that piece of advice. And moving on to the next sign that you've got an insecure boss. So they might refuse necessary resources for your work to get done. So that's another thing. So delaying your progress or undermining your work. That can be another great example. Slows down the team's success as a result, and potentially blames the team then for the work not being delivered on time, which can be a really challenging one if you've got a boss that's, promoting your work and advocating for you, but then they're also speaking about your inability to deliver as a result of decisions or indecision that they're making. That can be another great one. And maybe the last one that I'll land on for the moment is creating a toxic culture. So I have previously worked in a team that had a highly toxic culture. So people were really upset with the leadership decisions, the behaviours that were being demonstrated. And so what would happen at team meetings is everybody would openly talk about, when the boss wasn't in the room, how bad the boss was. And that was something that I tried at the time really hard to reduce and completely get rid of, to a point where I encouraged everyone to write down their thoughts, the things that had taken place that they disagreed with, and to share that with me so that I could either escalate it to HR or take action and deliver that feedback myself to my team member, to my boss. But it really had a huge impact, a toxic culture on our team. People's get up and go to turn up to work each day wasn't there. People were slow. They stopped accepting work. It really has an impact on productivity, well-being, and it just leads to a really awful scenario where many people can't really escape unless they leave their job when a leader isn't changing the way that they lead. So, these are the signs. Those are some of the signs. There are probably many more. But what I do want to pivot to now is the positive things that you can do to support an insecure boss when they're actually well-meaning. They're somebody that's come in, maybe they're early on in a position and they're trying to step up and, bridge the gap between being a contributing team member to then leading a team. That can be a really scary time for anyone that's stepping up into a promotion. And so it's really important that if you have a boss that is feeling insecure, you back them and you make them feel as confident as possible. You speak about them positively. You demonstrate your loyalty to them, because that can have resounding impact, because the day that they do find their feet and the day that they overcome that insecurity is the day that their career continues to skyrocket, and that will always in turn be remembered by that boss, but also then they become an advocate for you as well. Felicity, have you had any scenarios where you've had an insecure boss because they're early on in their promotion?
It's a great question. I'm actually reflecting for myself, going, oh my gosh, I can see some of the things that I did. So you might be listening to this thinking, oh, there's some of the behaviors that I have. Well, great, first of all, that you're listening to this podcast, you're wanting to develop yourself. So you're in the right place. And I think it's, wherever you're at is totally okay. There's so many moments where I've felt insecure. And I think that's really important what you said around, no matter what situation you're in, even if you are in a negative situation, leadership is all about how you respond to something. So you could have a boss that is a total jerk, and then, who are you going to be about that? Are you going to get on the gossip bandwagon? And I've gone into workplaces where that has happened, and I have said to my colleagues, hey, I don't gossip, so please, and gossip for me, I kind of define it with them, saying that it's, not speaking negatively, but it's putting someone else down behind their back, like that you wouldn't say it to their face, or you wouldn't actually, you haven't said that to them or had that conversation before. So you haven't had that conversation with them previously. So it was quite an interesting choice actually for me. And just if I take that example around saying I don't gossip, because I knew that meant that I was also excluding myself from conversations with my colleagues that would build a relationship with them. For me, that wasn't the relationship I wanted to build. So I was really clear about that boundary. And so I knew I was missing out on little tidbits around people and different things in the team. But for me, that's a really important value that I'm not going to cross the line on when it comes to gossip. So there's little things that we can do to shift those behaviours. And I think one that really stands out for me is, who do you get to be in a situation, and how can you, I love that they had the same recently around leadership, which I love, was how do you leave people better off after an interaction? And I feel like that's a great sign of a great leader, is that leaving people better than you found them, I believe was the exact quote.
Yeah, I love that. And to your point, this really can be applied even if that insecurity is, manifesting in a negative or a positive way. And we'll come to, our next set of advice around when it's time to draw the line and seek extra support, because I think the things that we're running through now around what you can do to try and support an insecure boss is really important, and if not more important, when you have somebody that's acting out in negative ways, but certainly applies in both contexts, negative and positive. So to your point, Felicity, showing respect consistently. So insecurity can stem from feeling undervalued. So how do you consistently turn up, acknowledge your manager's experience or your peers' insights, even in small ways, to demonstrate that you respect them and you back them. And you're giving them an ego boost in a way as well, recognizing their strengths, their skills, and how they're contributing. And I think that's really important. So to that point, it's praising them for their strengths and doing something that really helps them feel confident and respected in the workplace. Next, number 2, the thing that you can do to stand by your insecure boss is be reliable and transparent. So deliver on your promises, keep them looped in, build a trusting foundation with them. An example of how I've done this in the past is I've had a manager come to me and say, I don't understand why the team isn't happy. I don't understand why we can't improve well-being. Can you shed a light on what's really happening? And I chose at that point in time, I'd bitten my tongue for quite some time. I had a lot of context from the team around me, and I made the decision to be open and transparent and share what I really thought. And I did that again in a very professional way. But I shared why I thought the team generally, not calling out anyone in particular, but generally sharing these are the reasons why I think things aren't improving. And that can be a really hard conversation to have, to be honest and really share where your manager, the person that's supposed to be leading you and now all of a sudden you're leading them, is going wrong, can be really challenging. But again, I don't think leadership ever just starts when you're looking down. I think leadership goes up and down, and something that isn't spoken about often enough. So how can you support your boss? It's by being transparent, keeping them in the loop, and letting them know why you make decisions, but also sharing honest feedback when the time is right. What's
Yes.
your thoughts?
Yes, I think none of this is easy, right? Like if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. This stuff's really, really tricky. Humans are hard. Leading is a really tricky thing to do. So I think, if there's anything that you've listened to today, just like what is one thing that you could take away that would make a difference here? Because there's, a gazillion things that we could do. We could talk about this topic for, hours and hours and hours around how to manage this, because it is really tricky. So I think my key takeaway is like have compassion for yourself, because it's hard. And, each day, like for me, I'm just like, how do I be that, a better leader, a better person, a better human? How can I be kind and more compassionate to someone, especially if people are dealing with something like being insecure? So it's not easy. The job of a leader, I don't think is. So that would be my key takeaway to wrap up this. What would be your final thought, Renee?
Well, I've still got a few more to go if you don't.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No worries. I will just try and wrap it briefly. But next thing I would say is ask for their input and try and stay solution oriented. So when I say that, so the next thing I would say is ask for their input and stay solution oriented. And when I say that, let them know that you value their opinion by seeking their feedback and asking for their opinion on things, because I think that this really reassures them of their authority in those situations. And in terms of staying solution-oriented, don't just bring problems to them. So try and show that you're demonstrating initiative and reducing their stress by thinking about the next step and perhaps fostering a stronger work relationship with your manager by demonstrating that you can lead your own work as well. And I think some more positive things are you need to be a really strong communicator when you're working with someone that's a bit insecure. So, providing a lot of detail, concise summaries. I think these sorts of things really reduce their stress once more. Mm-hmm. And maybe the final thing I would say is setting clear boundaries. So establishing your own boundaries politely and respectfully. And I think what this does is actually unlocks your ability to put your boundaries in place. And then when those boundaries are exceeded, this is when you need to start thinking about raising your hand and asking for support. So something that people are really hesitant to do is when they're treated poorly or they're seeing patterns that, you think are not supporting a healthy culture and the well-being of your people, you have a duty to look after them by raising it with HR. I've certainly done in the past. So a very quick shout out to wrap up and say that it's okay to ask for help. And in order for you to go to HR, you need to make sure that you're documenting the things that you're experiencing, and where possible, providing some evidence of that, which might be emails, text messages, and those sorts of things. Certainly from a positive perspective, I don't think that it should ever need to get to that point unless work isn't getting done as a result of an insecure boss that's trying their best. But certainly if you have an insecure boss that is just creating a downward spiral in terms of delivery and culture, you do have a duty to try and put your hand up and let people know as soon as possible, so that a more formal process can be taken over and you can get more support through that process. So thank you for listening to today's session. It's been an absolute blast as always, Felicity. Any final thoughts?
Thanks, Renee. That's really grateful. I think just that last piece, I'm so glad you added that in there, which around documenting things. And I've certainly done that before and it's been helpful. And even if you don't go to HR about it, sometimes I've just found it helpful just to go, am I going crazy here? Like, oh no, actually this person has done this thing multiple times, and just even writing it down for myself. I think I'd always approach the person first and attempt to have a conversation, multiple conversations before escalating it and seeing if I can resolve it with that person one-on-one, but sometimes it's just too tricky. And yeah, for sure, I've gone to HR about people as well. And it was so helpful to have that documented, and it was a mentor that suggested I did that. So I'm really grateful that I did. Such a juicy episode, Renee. There's lots to think about. I've got a lot of key takeaways I'm going to go reflect on and ponder. I wish I'd had a lot of that before in very many previous bosses that could have helped me. So thank you for going through all that detail, Renee. Love it. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Promoted Podcast.
Absolutely. We love helping you get promoted and be great when you get there. So very happy to bring these more scandalous topics to Great session. See you in the next one.
Thanks, Renee.